I want to thank everyone for attending the first of our Lessons from the Field series here. We're very excited to have Amanda Moore with us today. Just a brief background, Amanda became CEO of the Angelman, sorry if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Angelman,
Yeah.
Angelman Syndrome Foundation in 2019. Before that, she was director of the Leadership Development, Diversity and Inclusion, and Global Strategies at the YMCA of Greater Indianapolis, where I believe you worked for over 18 years. Amanda earned her master's in leadership development, as well as a certificate in fundraising from the Indiana University School of Philanthropy. So we're very excited to have Amanda here with us today. And yeah, I'll go ahead and turn over the floor to you. Just for everyone on the call in terms of questions, we'll try and have a Q&A at the end. So feel free to put your questions into the chat. We'll make notes of them. And then at the end, we can open the floor for questions. But yeah, Amanda, please, thanks for attending. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And thank you. I'm incredibly excited to be here today and honored to be able to talk with you all a little bit about something that means a lot to me, because I think that as I came into this position, the one thing, and let me make sure, can everyone see my screen okay, first of all?
Indeed.
I'm trying to get it on the beginning here. As this is working, I will just go through. Can you see it? Is it in presenter mode?
Right now we're still seeing the slides, but I see a loading icon, so maybe it's getting there. There we go.
Okay, perfect. Love technology. So I should first say, I'll introduce myself a little bit, but I'm excited to be here today because I think the one thing that I learned when I came into the rare disease world was the incredible need and necessity for collaboration, especially when you have, you know, so many rare diseases in this space. You have most of the rare diseases have no organization supporting them, or the organization supporting them may be very small. So the more that we can work together and partner with various stakeholders, the better. So just a little bit about me. I think the most important thing that everyone on the call should know is that I'm a parent to a child with a rare disease. My son here, as you can see, the superhero on the screen is Jackson. He has Angelman syndrome. He was diagnosed when he was 2.5, and I could probably do a whole other session on our diagnostic odyssey, as it was a challenge as all diseases are. But Jackson was diagnosed when he was 2.5, and is just the sweetest, most loving child in the world. And we're just so blessed to have him. He's actually a twin. His twin brother, Baden, is who we call his wingman and his superhero. He's just so good and so wonderful with him. I came into the organization, I think, maybe a month after diagnosis. I reached out to the exec at the time, who is an amazing individual, and wanted to get involved. And I kind of said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to get lost in this grief. As it's very easy to do when you get this type of diagnosis. And I think I joined the board maybe 2 months after diagnosis, and I guess the rest is history. Here I am, changing career paths and helping lead an organization that means so much to me. So just a little bit about our organization, just so you can get an idea before I jump into this idea of collaboration. You know, the mission of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation is really kind of focused on 3 specific pillars. The goal is to advance the awareness of Angelman syndrome and the treatment, but also how do we support people through their journey right now? We concentrate on family support. We have a very large clinical network, and we have funded a tremendous amount of research in the last 30 plus years of this organization. So our ultimate goal of finding a therapeutic treatment, and we do this in multiple different ways. And one of the biggest ways we do this is through collaboration. And so I'm gonna go through a few things, but I wanna leave as much time as I can for some question and answers. Some of you on the call this may be very elementary to you, but hopefully some of you will get a glimpse of a rare nugget or something that you can take back with you. But there are a few key areas that we have collaborated in to really help us propel Angelman syndrome to where it is today. When I started and Jackson was diagnosed, 4-something years ago, there were maybe 5 or 6 pharmaceutical companies in the space, and now we're close to 25, 26. Angelman syndrome is one of those syndromes that we know a lot about. There's still a lot we need to learn, but enough that there's a lot of research being done, and there's a lot of hope that there is a possibility for a treatment. So because of that, there's a lot of excitement, but with that comes the need and the necessity and the ability to collaborate. So I want to talk about 4 or 5 different ways that we have really collaborated to really advance Angelman syndrome. And these are kind of the buckets. So talking around the idea of advocacy and how we engage with others when it comes to advocacy, talking about how we engage and collaborate with industry, talk a little bit about 2 programs that we did to collaborate to really expand our services around our data collection efforts, as well as our 15Q clinic network. So I want to start off and talk a little bit about advocacy. Advocacy is something that for any rare disease organization is essential, and it can be really overwhelming when you have 7,000 plus rare diseases in the space to be one of those organizations working really hard to advocate specifically for your rare disease. And so we kind of approached it a little differently at the foundation. I'm sure most of you on the call realize or have seen these 3 organizations, but these 3 organizations that are in front of you, Global Genes, NORD, and EveryLife Foundation, are the foundations we work very closely with and very intimately with when it comes to advocacy. And the reason why we do this is because they're doing a lot of the work already. And what we have found is when you collaborate and have a louder voice with the rare disease space, you have a more chance of getting heard. And so we do this in several different ways. For those of you that don't know much about EveryLife Foundation, they have a lot of ways that you can get involved, whether it's through a community congress. Their community congress have separate subgroups if you're interested in newborn screening, if you're interested in access, if you're interested in telehealth. They have different working groups that are working constantly on advocacy issues that are very important, in my opinion, to anyone who's in the rare disease space. And so that organization does really well of putting on, a yearly rare disease event on the Hill. They also do a really good job at putting out materials, as well as Global Genes and NORD when it comes to advocacy. So we make sure as an organization, if we are wanting to do something around advocacy, if we're wanting to put together any sort of resources, we always ask first, who else has done this? Who's working on it? Who's doing it? Because as a rare disease organization, you typically are very small staff-wise. So you don't have this large budget and a large amount of individuals that are able to really go out there and spend time specifically on one area of your organization. And so we always reach out and say, we really want to move into the realm of newborn screening when it comes to advocacy. What are our first steps? How do we go about that? Who's doing it? How can we work together? And so advocacy is a way that we have really collaborated and been able to really move the needle on the work that we're doing at the foundation. Even a year or 2 ago, advocacy wasn't really something we focused much on at the organization. And now, we're hosting and partnering with EveryLife to put on, webinars around advocacy and getting our families involved and going on to the Hill and talking to their local legislators. So that's really, really important. So that's one area that we really work and focus on. The other area that we found is essential when it comes to collaboration is when you work with your industry partners. And we've really kind of tried to take a very unique approach to the way that we're working with industry, because we feel very much that they need us as much as we need them to come up with a treatment for Angelman syndrome. And so, from the day one that I started the position, I started doing my best to establish these relationships and collaborate with them as much as possible. And so we do that in several different ways. I mean, obviously we have the monthly, sometimes weekly phone calls with them to let them, for them to ask questions, for them to help us understand what they need from us. What we also do is, you can see here on the left, we also do an industry newsletter every 2 months to all of our industry partners, letting them know the things that are happening at the foundation, the tools that they can use, the resources that they can use, upcoming dates that are really important for them to be engaged and involved in, and just really keeping them informed of what's happening in the community. So we are always in the forefront and in their minds when they're working through their drug development pipeline. We also worked as a community. We have a lot of different organizations supporting Angelman syndrome. And what we found was industry tended to need to go to all those different foundations to support and to work with the different foundations. And what we wanted to do was, how can we pool together and collaborate across the foundations in the space and create a community advisory board that industry, pharma could come to and get some of the questions answered that they would get. We get calls all the time from industry. Can we put together a parent group that we can ask questions to? Can we get parents to review, this brochure we're putting out or this outcome measure, whatever it may be? So we worked with Angelman organizations across the globe to put together a community advisory board. And this advisory board has of 10 to 12 individuals that sit on it from all over the world, from all walks of life, all parents, but that have some knowledge on what the drug development process looks like, what's going on in the Angelman space. And then we as a community advisory board went through a year-long process with URADIS, which is a rare disease organization overseas, and went through monthly trainings to really train ourselves up to be a really strong group for industry to utilize and use. And so that's one of the ways that we have collaborated both internally with our organizations within the Angelman space, and then externally with industry. The one thing that I always tell people when it comes to industry, you can never over communicate. So we communicate a lot with them and let them know what's happening in the space and going on. Another way that we have really moved the needle and set up a structure that is quite unique for the rare disease space is we went into a partnership with another rare disease organization, Duke 15Q Alliance, to combine our clinic networks. We had, 8 to 10 years ago, the very smart individuals who were here before me in this position had the foresight that it was incredibly important that we started building a clinical network to, one, provide clinical care to our families, because the one thing with rare diseases, most time when you go to any doctor, the first thing you hear is, well, I don't know much about Angelman syndrome. I haven't treated many individuals. So, creating this clinical network was going to be really important for us to be able to establish really excellent clinical care. But also, we wanted to really start building up clinicians and sites for future clinical trial sites. We wanted to be able to let industry know, we have this clinic network, and it's vital that you participate. You have some of these very invasive clinical trials happening in clinics with doctors that understand Angelman syndrome. And so we started kind of creating these clinics here and there. So in 2019, we had about 8 clinics within the United States and 4 globally. And so we started talking to our partners at the Duke 15Q Alliance. And because our diseases are both, 15Q diseases, most of our clinicians were seeing both of our syndromes. And so we started talking about what it would look like to collaborate and pool this clinic network together so we could expand access to more of our community, as well as how could we share the cost burden of this as well? Because one thing that most people will know as well is when it comes to the rare disease space, we do not have extremely large budgets. And so coming together and being able to partner in a way that you can, create ways to expand your network, but also help with funding is essential. So we created the 15Q Clinic Research Network. And so what this is several things. Is we've brought all of our clinicians together who are working in this space. We expanded from 8 clinics to 18 and 4 overseas overnight. We also have the clinic network. All the clinicians meet on a monthly basis. We bring them together. They talk about challenging cases. They talk about different symptoms, different treatment processes. They talk about different trials that are coming down the pipeline. It's a learning network as well as a clinical network. And so this clinic research was birthed in 2019. And we are already in the process of possibly adding 2 to 3 more clinics within the next 6 to 12 months. And it's a growing process. We would have not been able to do this if it wasn't for looking at other people in the rare disease space and what they're doing, and start having conversations about how we can collaborate and work closely together to be able to do that. With that also, one thing that we found was both organizations did not have a really effective way of collecting data at these clinics. For those of you that are out there that know the process of data collection and how important it is to collect data for drug development and to learn about the disease, the one thing that we found was, we had this wealth of knowledge and wealth of data sitting in these clinics, but we hadn't done anything to collect them. So one thing we decided to do was as we combined our clinic network, we came into a partnership with RTI International to create a database called Ladder. This is linking Angelman and Dup15q data through expanded research. So this is a database platform that links data on individuals, either Angelman syndrome or Dup15q, from multiple sources. The goal at first was to create a database that clinicians could use to upload and put in the data of the individuals attending the clinics. I mean, some of our clinicians or some of our clinics are seeing, on a yearly basis combined, close to 3,000 patients. And so that's 3,000 data of patients that we could be using that could really help us expedite, and get us closer to creating outcome measures, biomarkers, getting to treatments, all that fun stuff. And so we started building it for that case. But when we started getting into this, what we realized was one of the challenges we had as a community was we had data sets and data collection in multiple different places that weren't sharing or weren't accessible. And so we started working on, okay, maybe this database could be something more than just collecting clinical data. This could possibly be the brain of, Angelman and Dup15q data, that this could be a place where people could put all of their data in and it can be linked to the different data sources. So what we did was we started with our natural history study data. That data had been collected for a very long time. It was a wonderful PI and just didn't have the capacity to do a lot and to clean that data up. So we entered an agreement with them to give Ladder all the data. They cleaned it all up and put it in there. We're working on how it talks to the different registries. And we have a global Angelman registry, and we have a partnership with them of how this is linked. So when a patient comes in or a parent comes in to Ladder, the first question they're asked is, have you participated in the global Angelman registry, or have you participated in the natural history study? If the answer is yes, that information can be populated, so it takes the burden off the parent of having to enter in a lot of data. So this is a huge collaboration to solve a problem of this siloed data issue that we have in the rare disease space. And, it's been up and going for a year, and we're really excited that, the goal was to get this data out to researchers, industry, clinicians, whoever, as fast as possible and at no cost. And so all anyone has to do is submit a request for different level of access of the data. And, within days, you can get access to those data points. And so this was a huge endeavor. This and the both 15q clinic network was a huge endeavor and would not work with really careful collaboration, extremely delicate communication on how we're all working through this. But, the goal is, Ladder and our clinic network can become something that other people can collaborate with and join in on. If you're a rare disease group that just doesn't have a lot of dollars or doesn't have a lot of expertise in this area, it can be a way that this database could be used for multiple rare disease spaces to help cut down that burden. So that's I could talk about Ladder in the clinical network all day, but we don't have all day, so I can't. But that was a huge way that we have really worked in collaboration to expand our resources to our families, but also get us closer to treatments and also get more resources to those people that are out there that are needing that. And then just a couple of other things that I thought were really, really helpful and have been helpful for me in my first, few years in this journey is, I've joined a lot of think tanks or a lot of different type of networking groups, whether for me, it's either Agenda or the Rare Epilepsy Network or different networks that bring multiple rare disease groups together to have really crucial conversations, to work on different strategic plans or alignments, different objectives. And that's been really, really huge for me because it's one, given me the opportunity to learn, but the opportunity for collaboration comes up all the time on these groups. So, a couple examples, and one of the things before you create, ask. And the one thing that we do is, if we have something that we're about ready to work on or about ready to spend or invest in or create, I often will ask these groups before and say, hey, we're working on adult transition resources for our families. This is something that is an issue and is something that we need to do to support our families, but we have no resources. Does anybody have any resources out there? And then, throughout the day, you start getting email after email after email of a PDF, a Word file, whatever. And then, it's been really easy to take some of those things because a lot of our adult transitioning or a lot of our walks of life are very similar for our individuals with rare diseases. And so a lot of it can just translate across rare diseases. So we have created so many resources off the backs of other disease areas that have already done it. And it saved us a lot of time and a lot of resources. And I think that one of the biggest things I would say is to collaborate to ease your budget. With the clinic network and with Ladder, the staff of the clinic network, our clinic director and our clinic admin, what we pay to support the clinics as well as Ladder, those are all joint costs now. And in the past, there were all costs that would come on to one or other of the organizations. And now they're joint costs. So the money that we're saving by collaborating, we're able to put back into the community to really support in many ways families as or rare disease organizations and families as they move forward. So there's multiple different ways that you can collaborate. But I would say the best advice I got when I started this role is you don't have to do this alone as a rare disease group. There are so many different rare disease organizations. There are so many different partners in this work that have walked the walk before you. So reach out, talk, find out what resources are out there that you need and how people can help you in that. And that's just a few ways that we have, really worked really hard to collaborate as an organization to really move the needle in the Angelman space. So I know I've talked a lot. I would love to open it up and see if there's any questions from the group and how I can maybe answer any of those.
Thanks so much, Min. I see we already have one in the chat from Debbie, it looks like. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd rather say it in person. Everyone should have the ability to. But I see great work on data collaboration, not a question, but a compliment. How did you find resources to put this in place? And were scientists / clinicians readily willing to link in with you?
So I think from the very beginning, when we started the clinic network, it was a lot on family recommendations. So we would maybe have a parent or a clinician or a neurologist that had seen multiple Angelman syndrome individuals. And so It was about reaching out and talking to that specific neurologist and saying, hey, we're working on creating this clinic network structure. Would you be interested in hosting a clinic? And the clinics, I will say, look very and vastly different per each clinic. So some of our clinics are seeing 300 to 400 patients a year. They see them on a weekly basis, and they have clinics, all week. And then we have some clinics that will hold an Angelman clinic once a month. And that's when they have all their Angelman individuals come in. And that helps, in some ways, the cost of that hospital structure, but also helps organize, because when you go into a clinic, you're not just seeing one specialist. You might be seeing a neurologist, you might be seeing someone on gastro issues, you might be seeing a behavior specialist. And so you have to organize all those schedules. So it's very vastly different on the way. So one, having flexibility for those clinicians are really, really important. For the most part, people have been incredibly excited about the idea of starting the clinics. And if I've put my information out there, if anybody wants the documents on how we set up the clinics, the kind of the agreements, what the expectations are, I'm more than happy to send that information out. We started at the beginning with really dedicating some of our budget towards helping these clinics get started. Most of the time, what these clinics need are just a clinic coordinator, like someone who can coordinate these clinics as they move forward. So we started a 3-year payment structure where we'd start off with giving them and a large amount to get started, and then the next year it would tier down, and then the next year it would tier down. We've switched that structure now to where, because if the clinic buys into entering the data into Ladder, they can get reimbursed per patient up to a certain amount per year from each organization. So basically that would equal the amount of money it takes to, cover maybe a clinic coordinator. For the most part, all the clinicians, all the clinics have been very excited about Ladder. I will tell you, it's, I thought it would be quicker to get it up and going, but when you add institutional lawyers involved into it, when it comes to data collection and data sharing, it can get a little dicey. So we've had to do a lot of contract and legal conversations. But for the most part, our clinicians are really excited because they understand the severe need of this data and getting this data in. And so, we really, from the very beginning, involved them. We brought all of our clinicians together and we started talking about the crucial data points that we wanted to put into Ladder. And we try to mirror them to the forms that they were already doing in intake. So it would make it much easier and we wouldn't add a lot of the burden to them in that process. So we started off by piloting, 3 to 4 sites. And now we're starting to onboard all the other ones. So slowly but surely we're getting moving. But I think that for the most part, there was not hesitation. The hesitation came more from the legal aspect of who's going to own this data now. And so that's something that we've been working through as well. And I think someone asked something about the clinical trial committee that we have. The clinical trial committee is basically a smaller committee of the 15Q Clinic Research Network. It's head up by Dr. Liz Berry-Kravis, who has extensive knowledge in clinical network. And then we have other clinicians that sit on that. So if an industry would like to set up a meeting with the clinical trial committee, they'll reach out to us and we'll schedule a time. And what that provides is that industry can then present their trial design of what they're planning for their trial to these clinicians who will most likely be running the trial, and they can give feedback, input, and it's been incredibly valuable because it helps the industry understand, like, one, the population, like, for someone with Angelman syndrome, it's really hard to travel and sleep overnight. So doing a trial where you have to travel and stay overnight for multiple times is going to be a huge burden on the family. So knowing that and helping the industry prepare families for that is essential. But also there's been things that the outcome measure or whatever just doesn't make sense. And so these clinicians can help the pharma through that. So it's very structured in the way of industry reaches out to the Angelman Syndrome Foundation and says, we would like to schedule a meeting with the clinical trial committee. We put it together. They're all under NDA and CDA, and they present, and then we go from there. So it's been a really valuable resource to the community. Hopefully I answered those questions.
That sounded fantastic, Amanda. Thanks so much.
And I will tell you, Matthew, when I look at the question again, the people that I think we're having the most challenged with when it comes to linking their data or sharing their data is industry. So if they're doing a trial or they've collected data, obviously there's some competitiveness involved in there. So with us, if you give us our date, if you give any data to the to Ladder, you automatically get a seat on the data access committee. So anytime a request is submitted to us, the data access committee is pulled together. We review it, and then we approve it, or say we will approve it on this condition or deny it. So, if someone from industry wants to submit their data points and someone's requesting that specific data, they have say on whether or not they want to approve that. But that's been the hardest. What we try to tell industry is that one gift that you can give back to the community is, if you're collecting data, give it to Ladder so it can continue to be used to learn more about the disease and support. So we're working on that part now. That's going to take a little bit more massaging, and I think a little bit more convincing, but I think we're getting close.
Yes, Dina, so you unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to say thanks.
Oh,
yeah.
of course.
Yeah, it was a wonderful presentation, and I love to see collaboration success. I wish us all the same success. It's not, we're not all there yet. I wanted to ask you about how you as an organization are using or accessing that data in kind of a pre-research sort of mode, in terms of better understanding the community, maybe directing or guiding or prompting researchers to get engaged and so on. So do you actively engage in that data yourself?
So we're starting that. Of what the partnership with RTI is that they're starting to create these like one-pagers about specific areas of the disease. So maybe one of the one-pagers is like the different types of medications for seizures. And so they're producing these resources so that then we can learn that we can also turn around and create some standards of care or support for families moving forward. Same with like different trends on the age of diagnosis. That's one thing, we're noticing that as we're writing a paper right now on the age of diagnosis, because in the past, the diagnostic odyssey for Angelman syndrome has been a nightmare. I mean, I talked to someone the other day that just was diagnosed with Angelman syndrome at age 46. And so, but it's gotten much better. And so we are looking at some of that data to see that now people are getting diagnosed much earlier. And we were able to see that through Ladder. So yes, we are starting to use that data. Our clinicians are using that data as well to be able to look at ways of, for treatment options, especially as we get into the more complicated issues of Angelman syndrome or DUP15 for their perspective. So we are going to start using that, creating family newsletters, family information all around the disease, because it's something that we haven't been able to do. And we weren't able to really get access from the natural history study data. And now we can, because we have it, and we have it in a way that we can pull easily. And I would say, Dean, it's not all perfect on collaboration. I probably said all the sunshine and roses part of it, but there are a lot of challenges that go with it as well. And a lot of it comes down to communication, territory, those kind of things. But I think, in the most part, we try to work through those, but I don't want it to come across as it is all sunshine and roses. It can be challenging.
Well, pretty roses take some good fertilizer too.
It's true. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, and you actually kind of touched on where I'm heading a little bit, which is not only advocacy, understanding the disorder and the journey of the patients, mm-hmm. but really, research tends to focus towards therapies. Yep. And what we're trying to do in our space, of course, is advanced therapies, but also clinical and clinical activities and guidance, mm-hmm. Standards of care, as well as quality, just kind of that general quality of life. Those things that are somewhat peripheral, but they're equally as important in the journey and experience of the patients. And so I find that, and I love RTI. I work with them on a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But those people think in a certain way.
Yep.
Right. And advocacy, this afternoon, you're going to get, 3 phone calls. You're going to go 3 different directions. Right.
Yep.
And so that data is just such an awesome source to gather that information or to expand the information.
Yeah. Well, and I agree. I think the reason why we were so passionate about it and we invested in it, because it's not a cheap investment, is that we wanted to be a place where people could come and get access to this data, because we were finding it was so hard. But also, how can we learn more? Because I'm glad you're going in that direction, because I think sometimes we often forget that families are dealing with this day to day. So if we can come up with ways to ease the burden of the disease now, the symptoms, and help with treatments and help with best practices as we're making our way to hopeful treatments, that to me is essential. And so having data for clinicians to be able to look at that across, the disease platform is I think one of the ways that this tool is going to be best utilized. And the great thing too is, if anybody wants to look, we actually have a website. It's laddertotreatment.org, and you can go on there, and we actually have a dashboard, so people can go on and look at the data that's in there, look at some basic, geographic or basic information about the data that's actually in there. You can learn about data. That's where you can request access, and that's where parents go and enroll, because you can enroll in data even if you're not going to, or enroll in Ladder even if you're not going to a clinic. So it's a great resource, and my hope is that, like you said, we'll start using that data to better inform as we move forward, especially with clinical care.
And maybe I missed this, but is there patient reported or parent reported data in there as well, or is it all doctor?
It's both. It's both. Yep. It's both. Yep. So the goal, especially with the clinic network, what happens is if a parent wants to go to a clinic, what they do is they get this link to Ladder, go on, fill out the enrollment forms, fill out the information. And then after the fact, when they go to the clinician will go in there and enter the clinical data that needs to be entered. And then every year they get like a postcard on the kid's birthday, like, hey, happy birthday, go update your information, kind of thing. So it is both at this point.
Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the engaging questions, everyone. Are there any more questions either in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself, like I said, to ask Amanda? We have another thank you in the chat for your presentation.
Well, and like I said, my email is on here, my phone number is on here. I love to talk with other rare disease groups or other individuals. I'm more than happy to share any of our information, pass it on. I am a queen of, I don't want to duplicate efforts if they're already out there. So whatever you need, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to support.
Thanks so much for that openness to share, Amanda. That's really the spirit we need in this space.
Yes.
To achieve these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll leave it in case people do want to keep going. Man, anything else that's come up for you just based on the questions I've been asked, or anything else you think you might want to talk about? Oh, we do have a question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. How can industry best support your efforts?
So it's funny, I was speaking at the World Disease Congress a couple weeks ago, and someone asked me this when it comes to data collection or advocacy. And to be perfectly blunt and honest, the best way you can support a rare disease organization is by financially supporting them as well. We are very, very blessed that our industry is very kind to us, and the reason why we're able to do a lot of that we do and put together something as robust as the Ladder database is because we do get support from industry. So I think that's one way of, we are very, very small organizations, and sometimes industry wants things done quicker. And because we are, a staff of 2 or 3, it makes it a little bit more challenging. But we are, in my opinion, we are the voice of the community. So we're like the stop that pharmacy really needs to be working with and supporting. So financially supporting, I think also, if there's any, I mean, when you do a clinical trial or when you do anything and you have data, giving that back to the community, I think is just a beautiful gift. Now, families may not understand that as a beautiful gift because some families don't understand the importance of data collection, but it's really, really essential, especially for a disease like Angelman syndrome, where we don't have a lot of established biomarkers and endpoints, but we're already in trials. It's really important for us to have that data and that information. So, doing that. And then I would say another way is education. One thing that extremely worries me and keeps me up at night sometimes is our community and their understanding of gene therapy and what this looks like, and the process of drug development, and this idea of therapeutic treatments and what that means. And, for industry, they get their drug, they get, if they're working on an ASO or whatever, they understand it. And for them to be able to provide resources, whether it's webinars or, pamphlets or whatever around what that therapeutic treatment is, what it's aimed to do, the, projected timeline. As a parent coming into this space, when I didn't know anything, I thought gene therapy, would be next year, and my son would have a pill and wake up and be a typical child without Angelman syndrome. And that's okay, because that's just not the mindset I've had in the past. I haven't had to think about this stuff. And so education, like providing educational resources is huge. So I would say funding, data if they have it, and educational resources, I think is three ways that they can really support.
I had another question, was just looking at the webpage and clicking on clinicians prompted me.
Yes.
Are you providing any compensation to the clinicians? Because this is, the clinical researchers that are the experts, they
Yes.
have an interest in this, but the typical clinician that all the rest of us see.
Yeah.
Was there a financial offset for them to spend, 15 or 20 minutes entering data, or some of their staff?
Yeah, there is. Each year the clinicians submit the amount of the patients that they've submitted into ladder, or the patients that they've seen, and we reimburse or provide a stipend to them to support that effort. We also are launching this year something called discovery grants for our clinic network, and it's a pot of money where clinicians can submit. We've left it very vague. They can submit an application to receive up to $50,000 to be able to, maybe it is they want to add a behavior specialist to their clinic, or maybe they want to take data from the clinic from Ladder and create a really robust standard of care for anxiety and behavior in individuals with AS. So we are looking for ways that we can better support our clinicians, because we know that they're doing a lot, but we also know they want to do more. And in order to do that, they need financial supporting. So we do help them in that way. And we're expanding that as much as we can as we move forward. And some clinicians some clinics get more than others, because like I said, some clinics see 300 patients, some may only see 10. So it varies on the actual clinical site.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Not to be the broken record, but any more questions for Amanda here? We've had some really great questions so far, and really great follow-up conversation to the presentation as well. I guess I cut you off earlier, Amanda. Anything else that had come up for you, as I'd said, just because of the questions or just post-presentation?
No, I just think that maybe just some encouragement. I think that it's sometimes really, really hard to sit on these webinars or sit on, different groups and hear how far other rare disease groups are compared to yours. And I've been in that space. I mean, I understand that. I think that the great thing is that I'm hoping, and I think I'm seeing more of this collaboration happening in the rare disease space. And so the hope is that the people who have walked that journey before will turn around and, go back and hold the hands of the people who are, who don't even have a natural history study set up yet, but want to. So how do I do that, right? So I think that some encouragement of, hang in there, but also reach out and let people support and help you and collaborate where you can, because, in all reality, we can't do this alone. I've learned that there's so many facets that go into running a rare disease organization. And it can be incredibly challenging, and especially if you're doing it alone and it seems like a huge mountain. So I would just encourage people to hang in there, because you're doing really amazing work and really important work, but also just reach out to people who may be a little bit ahead of you because they were once in your place. So let them help.
Those are some wonderful words of encouragement.
Including me. You can call me anytime.
We'll use some of your fertilizer, see how we can.
Yes, please. I love the analogy.
You started it.
Yeah.
Well, not to cut us off early, I'm sure, Amanda, if you have a few minutes to stay on, just in case anyone else has a question. So I guess formally, we can just wrap this up. Thank you so much once again to all of us here for attending and presenting, just talking about what you've done. It's really great to see. And of course, just congratulations on your work so far, and looking forward to see what comes next.
Thanks so much.
To everyone
Thanks for
else,
having me.
No, of course. Thank you so much for attending the first in our series of Lessons from the Field. I'll go ahead and I'll put the link to our Genetic Alliance website page on the upcoming session. You should all be able to see it. So feel free to join us again in the future. And we'll go ahead and I think we'll stop the recording now. And yeah, wonderful.